So, I just finished watching Ergo Proxy. It's a show that I had heard about over the years, but for whatever reason, I just never really gotten around to watching until just recently. It's a story about a dystopian future in which most of humanity has been mysteriously wiped out, and the small collection of survivors have been relegated to various dome-protected societies across the planet. It's got all the standard high-tech dystopian future tropes that you would expect. Artificial intelligence that becomes self-aware and then turns on its human creators? Check. A protagonist who's a hard-nosed detective that dresses in dark clothes and has a mysterious past.
Check.
A cold, dark, and gray aesthetic that casts a sterile and somber cloud over every episode? Check. And of course, an insidious and deep-rooted government conspiracy that is sure to bring the end of humanity as we know it.
Check, please.
Oh yeah, and there's like these crazy demon god things who are like super sad and something like that. It's weird, I don't know. Ergo Proxy is a whole lot of shit tightly condensed into a very small space. It somehow manages to feel completely overwhelming while simultaneously having me begging for more. I watched all 23 episodes in the span of about 2 weeks. I took my time, made sure I fully digested an episode before I moved on to the next one. I wanted to be completely sure of what I was seeing, of what I was supposed to be learning and reflecting on. I gave the show my complete and undivided attention, and I was completely strapped in on my search for meaning of Ergo Proxy. And in the end, I had no clue what was going on. That's a bit of an exaggeration, right? Like, I get some of it. Like the whole concept of our suffering being one of the most important parts of the human condition, because it's our pain that allows us to grow and form bonds from the act of healing ourselves and the act of healing others. Like got that. And the whole idea behind the relationship between a creator and its creation. And no matter what the level of scope the two may take, whether it be God creating man, or man creating God, or man creating robots, or a being creating themselves. Regardless, there are universal complications that will inevitably arise between the two. And there are plenty more themes I could lightly summarize, but then we'd be here all day. Whether I get it or not, the truth is, I love this show. It took me a little bit to realize why that was, though. Usually, if I watch something and I don't get what it's trying to say, I end up hating it out of frustration, and I'm sure that's something that a lot of you can identify with. But eventually I came to the conclusion that Ergo Proxy is an exception because I don't think Ergo Proxy is meant to be understood. Or at least, it doesn't need to be understood to be enjoyed. The strength of Ergo Proxy isn't in the story, but in the way that the story is told. Storytelling, as some people call it. All of the best episodes of Ergo Proxy feel almost completely disconnected from any major plot points, and that might sound like a bad thing at first, but I think anyone who's actually watched the show would agree that the best part of the show is the string of episodes in the middle of the series when Vince, Pino, and Riel are traveling the barren landscape of what's left of the world together. It was this part of the story that really made me love the show. These middle episodes are when the show is at its most personal, most captivating, most ridiculous, most hilarious, most genre-breaking, and most heartfelt. While I wouldn't say the first 7 or so episodes are bad by any means, they really only serve as an appetizer. Episode 7 and Episode 8 about Vincent and the fellow survivors of the colony attack making the trip to Vincent's hometown and slowly dying out one by one to the harsh conditions is where the show really got my attention. Vince's solemn narration and monologues describing his mental state during the events was bone-chilling. It reminded me a lot of the Black Freighter story from The Watchmen, which, anytime something reminds me of The Watchmen, it's usually a pretty good thing. Episode 9 was also cool to finally get to see a fully realized proxy fight, and it dropped some good breadcrumbs about Vince's character and the concept behind the proxies as well. Episode 11 was what really blew my mind in terms of storytelling. Everything to do with the library and just how trippy the first half of that whole episode is. This was when I stopped trying to figure out what the writers were trying to say, and instead just started to appreciate the fascinating ways in which they were actually saying it. It's a great mind of an episode that's fun to watch even if you don't know what's going on. Episode 12 is pretty interesting too. Through Iggy's eyes, we finally start to get an understanding of what causes autoraves to develop free will and emotion. And it's done in such a hilarious way, with Iggy turning into a robo version of a foul-mouthed jealous ex. Every time he calls Riel a bitch, I start dying, man. It's hilarious.
Riel, useless Riel, incomplete Riel. Besides me, who could deal with a whiny bitch like you?
Little stupid bitch! Little dumb teaching bitch!
It also further illustrates the running theme of a creation inevitably becoming like its creator, and falling into the same pitfalls and destructive personality traits. Episode 14 brings back the Trippy vibes in a major way. It's one of the best examples of the show proving that it's at its best when it tells small, contained stories that focus on basic human emotions and what can happen when extreme feelings of loneliness and betrayal are left unchecked, and just how deep the depths of despair we can reach when that really happens. Episode 15 might be the best episode in the entire series. It's basically the most important episode in terms of lore and understanding the history and the world of Ergo Proxy. And it could have been, and probably should have been, just a boring exposition dump of an episode, but instead they managed to make it the most fun and over-the-top ridiculous episode in the show. And I mean this when I say it. I have never seen a show make exposition as fun and entertaining as this episode did, and it still manages to be as dark and as twisted as any normal episode in the show as well. And okay, I kind of lied. Episode 16 is actually the best episode in the show. When I realized what was happening with the complete lack of music and the complete stagnation in terms of plot or action, I kind of lost my mind, in a good way. Not to mention the beautifully touching ending that finally brings Riel's character full circle. This episode is fucking amazing, man. It's the pinnacle of the show's storytelling capabilities. And the craziest part is that nothing even really happens. Episode 19 is just goofy as hell, but in the best way possible. I like that they give Pino at least one episode to herself mostly, and it's perfectly fitting for her character. The tone of this episode is unlike any other in the series, and it's a really nice departure right before the big climax. And when I think about the show, it's these episodes and some others that really excite me the most and make me want to rewatch it. Most of them don't unravel any major mystery that the overarching narrative is focused on. They're small, little stories about three lost characters trying to find their way, both literally and figuratively. And in a show featuring murderous tech robots, crazy demon gods, and 3 whole textbooks worth of high philosophy conjecture, these episodes managed to be some of the most relatable and grounded stories I had ever seen. In the end, I don't really care about the greater meaning of it all. Maybe I should. Maybe I'm missing out on not fully understanding all the subtle subtext of Ergo Proxy and its greater meaning and message it was trying to say, but much like the actual characters themselves, all I really ended up caring about was the journey that they took together and the moments that they shared with each other. I don't understand Ergo Proxy, but I don't really understand my own life either, and that's fine. Understanding is overrated. Instead of constantly searching for meaning, forcing yourself to suffer for the sake of truth you may never find or never be able to handle, it might be better to just enjoy the ride and embrace what you can comprehend, cherishing the people and the places that love you and that need you, despite the darkness that might surround you. That is the true value of life. But that's just my opinion. Don't ever be afraid to speak yours. But seriously, what the was up with that ending? It was all over the place. I had no idea what the happened. There's 3 Vinces and 2 Riels and everything's burning and dying and I don't know. It was weird. Great show though. Great show.